Over the last 2 years, Bitcoin's up almost exactly 100%. And so it reflected all of the inflation that we were going to see over the past year in real time. So people who look at CPI numbers, they're looking in the rearview mirror. The road's already turned and they're about to fly off the cliff.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have investor Mark Yusko on the current market standards and how the Federal Reserve is playing a major role in the crypto and financial market today. Yusko says that earnings and growth are crumbling. Because no one is working this summer, there isn't any volume in the markets. This leads to short, compressed days, bolstered on perceived positive news. Yusko states that anyone looking at the CPI is only seeing what has happened in the past and has nothing to do with the current economic framework. He believes that increasing or decreasing interest won't impact inflation because it was caused by oil prices working unnaturally due to the Saudis overflowing the market during the shutdown. Let's watch this interview with Mark Yusko as he gives his outlook on the current economy and the Fed's impact on price gouging. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy what we do here on this channel. Let's get right into the video.
Growth is collapsing. Earnings usually follow growth. So it was just amazing to watch. And so look, this summer, I don't know if you've been out and about, but this summer, no one's working. I mean, you and I are working right now, but everyone's on vacation. Everyone is gone. There's no volume in the markets. And when there's low volume in markets, you can get these kind of short squeezy days on perceived good news. So you asked the question about inflation. CPI is kind of a silly number. It's massively lagging. It really doesn't have anything to do with reality. And I'll give you a perfect example. So over the last 2 years, the Fed created half of all the dollars in the history of the Republic. 248 years, they created half. So theoretically, the dollar should have weakened about 50%, and Bitcoin price should have risen 100%. Almost over the last 2 years, Bitcoin's up almost exactly 100%. And so it reflected all of the inflation that we were going to see over the past year in real time. So people who look at CPI numbers, they're looking in the rearview mirror. The road's already turned and they're about to fly off the cliff.
Yusko has observed the housing prices rising over the past year, even though the quality or efficiency of the houses haven't increased. The rise in prices are due to the money people use to purchase houses being extremely undervalued. This happened because the Fed has overprinted the dollar, which will not change the amount of money existing, no matter how much they alter the Fed funds rate.
What they do with interest rates, whether they raise them or lower them, it really isn't going to change inflation. Everybody's going to say, oh, look, Jay Powell broke the back of inflation like Volcker. No, he didn't. That decline in inflation has nothing to do with interest rates. It has to do with the fact that oil prices ran unnaturally because the Saudis flooded the market during the lockdown, collapsed the price of oil to negative. Remember, oil prices went negative for a few hours. Then they rebounded from $40 to $120. And that shows up as CPI. Well, now oil prices are back under 100. They'll probably be back closer to 60 by the election. And over the whole period, oil prices will be unmoved and CPI won't exist. The other part of inflation print was used car prices. Raising the Fed funds rate isn't going to change the chip shortage in China. It's not going to change the zero COVID policy in China. It's not going to change the price of wheat in Ukraine. It's not going to change the price of natural gas going to Europe from Russia in the fall when temperatures start to go down and they're still buying Russian gas. So that's a long-winded way of saying what the Fed does really has very little to do with inflation, because what we're experiencing is not inflation. It's not demand pull inflation. It's not that we have excess demand and limited supply. It's we devalued the currency. I use housing prices here in North Carolina as the best example. Housing prices over last year went up 40%, 40 in 1 year. Did my house get bigger? Did it grow? Did it get more efficient? Did it somehow get better? No, it actually wore out. I had to put money into it to keep it at the same level. But what happened is the money that people used to buy houses got devalued because they printed too much of it. And the Fed isn't going to change the number of dollars in the world by changing the Fed funds rate. The whole markets, the whole economies collapse if you try to take that funny money, because it really is funny money. I mean, it's money created out of thin air. And part of it is that's the plan. I mean, I hate to say it that starkly, but that has been the plan since 1913. The Fed was created to create inflation. Inflation is a myth, right? Inflation is not good for the average person. Think about it. If inflation increases a couple percent a year over a 25-year period, half of your purchasing power is destroyed.
Gone.
Why is that good for you? It's not. It's really good for the people at the tippy top. And it's why we have the greatest wealth and income inequality in the history of the world. And it's because for better part of 100 and some odd years, 109 years, the Fed has quietly been stealing the wealth of the masses and siphoning it up to the tippy top. And here's a factoid that no one talks about, actually makes me really angry. In the lockdowns, right, which may have, in hindsight, may have been the worst policy decisions global policymakers made in the history of policy. It's a big statement. But in that period, instead of things getting better on this front, $3.5 trillion with a T, trillion, $3.5 trillion of wealth went from the average person to the elite class, the owners, the super majority owners of these little tiny oligopolies. And that is part of the plan, right? I actually believe it was the plan all along. And it's kind of crazy that we all cheer for the Fed to, bring us this inflation or tame inflation. Inflation shouldn't exist. It's not something we should hope for. The Federal Reserve is neither federal, right? It's not federal. It's not owned by the government. It's not a government agency. It has no full faith and credit. It is owned, as you said, by prime brokers and banks. It has no reserves, right? It's not like a normal bank where there are actually reserves. And it's basically about price fixing. They price fix an interest rate that should be set by the market. The market should determine interest rates. Look, price fixing of any kind, right? Minimum wage, interest rates, rent control, price fixing of any kind is bad. People think it's good if it benefits them, like if they live in a rent controlled apartment or if they're on minimum wage. But minimum wage is a form of price fixing. And you should let the market determine the fair wage, the proper wage. But it's not livable. Well, define livable. Just because someone's willing to maybe live 3 families in a house instead of in a big mansion, and they can get by on a smaller amount of money because they just want to work, that doesn't mean that shouldn't happen. Who gets to decide what's the right amount to pay someone for their services? That's what the market determines. Just like when you and I decide to sell a good or service, we negotiate a price, and we should have the flexibility in an open and free market to decide that.
Yusko says that once you take all of the free money out of the system, entire economies and markets will collapse. Yusko believes that inflation is a myth that only rewards the people at the top of the pyramid. The reason why we have the largest wealth and income disproportion in the world is because the Fed has been slowly taking the cash from the masses and delivering it to the elite. Mark notes that the Federal Reserve has been price-fixing interest rates that should be determined by the market. He says the market should be able to set fair and proper wages instead of the Fed, and the market needs to be free, open, flexible, and have the ability to decide prices. What do you guys think about Mark Yusko's opinion of the Fed's impact on the economy? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Library of Wealth. We'll see you in the next video.